Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with FibroFog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. You're listening to the Fibromyalgia Podcast with Tami Stackelhaus, episode 49. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhaus. Today, I want to share a way of thinking about things that might help you understand why you might have a diminished capacity for handling things right now. In case you hadn't noticed, there's a few things going on in the world right now. And over the last few weeks, I've been talking with a lot of people about just their capacity to deal with it all. And I have an analogy that I like to use that I think helps put everything in context and helps things make sense a little bit more. This is also a concept that you can use at any time, really, to help you know when you're about to overdo things and why sometimes you can do more things than you might be able to do others. I personally call this the bucket theory. So we'll be talking about that a little bit today. Before we dive into today's episode, as always, I have our listener shout out for you. This one came in October in an email from Lauren. She says, I've recently been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and have been listening to your podcast as often as I can. Your episodes are fantastic. Thank you so much for doing them. I don't know where I would be without them. She goes on to say, I live in Maryland in the greater DC area. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old that I take care of on my own every day. I would love to connect with a coach who has experience with helping young moms. I'm desperate for guidance. Thank you so much for messaging us, Lauren, and thank you for letting me share this on the podcast. It can really be a challenge, I think, just managing our own fibromyalgia, right? But then you also have the responsibility of taking care of some little ones, and then it really does become overwhelming and need a little bit of help. So I'm glad that you're reaching out, asking for help with a coach. For those of you who are interested in similar topics, I would recommend going back and checking out an episode that we released earlier this year. Episode 37 is with one of my, at the time, she was a coach in training. She's now become a fully certified fibromyalgia coach. That's Julie Schiffman. And we talk a lot about being a mom, raising kids, all of that kind of stuff. So if you haven't, go back and check that out. It is episode number 37, and we'll have the link to that episode in the show notes for today's episode. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/49. You'll find all the links there. So today, as I said, I want to talk a little bit about ways that just sort of a framework for you to use to think about your own capacity for doing things, for dealing with things. As I said at the beginning, in case you hadn't noticed, we got a few things going on right now. We've got a global pandemic. Some of us have been in lockdown for many months. Here in Seattle, things got shut down pretty early. And while things are open again, being in a high-risk category myself, I honestly, since March, have only really gone to see my chiropractor every week. And that's pretty much all I do. That's the only time I leave the house for the most part. There may be parts of the country, other parts of the world where maybe that is not the case. I talked to someone who was in Hawaii who said everything's pretty much normal here. Everybody's tested when they come in. Nobody's tested positive for COVID, so we're all good. And that's awesome. So that may not be something that is part of what you are mentally and emotionally dealing with. But for many of us, it is. And I think it's been going on long enough now that we've sort of minimized in our minds the effect that the pandemic is having on us. But I want to introduce you to something called the bucket theory. At least that's what I call it. Imagine your capacity, and when I mean capacity, I'm talking about that combination of physical energy, your mental and emotional capacity to deal with things, that's what I mean by capacity. You know, those moments where all of a sudden you feel like it's just too much and you just can't take one more thing. That's the kind of mental, physical, emotional components that I'm talking about here. So if you imagine that capacity like a bucket, some of us have big buckets, some of us have little buckets, some of us have buckets that are already full. So earlier today, I was talking with another coach, and we talked about the fact that for many of us, we have this container for capacity, for things that we can do, things we can emotionally handle, mental stress we can handle, and things like that. And she was feeling really overwhelmed, and she felt like, I'm looking around at what I'm doing, and I don't feel like I'm doing too much. So why do I feel like I just don't have the capacity to handle things right now? And I reminded her, well, you've got this bucket, and the bucket's already maybe your bucket is already half full because you're dealing with the pandemic. She happens to be in healthcare, so that is affecting her more. And then here in the US, whatever side you're on, we have the election happening right now. And for many of us, that may fill your bucket up some more. And, you keep adding these things in there and you have less capacity, less room in your bucket, right? So let's say that there wasn't a pandemic happening right now. Let's say that the world was as we knew it, maybe a year and a half ago. Your capacity, your bucket, would fill up with things like maybe not getting enough sleep, maybe eating too much sugar or unhealthy food, maybe doing a little bit more physical activity than you normally would do, maybe a little bit of additional stress. And all of those things would be going into your bucket and filling your bucket up. And at a certain point, your bucket gets so full that it spills over, and that's when we have a fibro flare. That's when we have an exhaustion flare-up or a pain flare-up, because really our bucket just can't hold anymore, and so it spills over. This is why many times you might be like, but I could eat sugar before, and why does it feel like that's a problem now? Or I've got terrible sleep. I normally don't get good sleep, so why is now a problem? It's that idea of multiple things combining together, and you just don't have the capacity. You don't have a bucket big enough to hold it all, and it's using up some of those things. So that is like normal, quote unquote, life that maybe we experienced before. Then we come into 2020 and we end up with a global pandemic, right? And that automatically fills our bucket a certain amount, and it's always there, and we can't do anything about it, right? Like, I can't go out into the world and change the fact that there's a global pandemic. I can't go out there and fix that problem. So it's just going to be an amount in my bucket that is filling things up, which gives me less space then for flexibility, right? That means I need to make sure I get better sleep because I have less room in my bucket. If I don't get good sleep, it'll be easier for my bucket to overflow and for me to end up in a flare. Add on top of that pandemic, right? Add on top of that election season here in the US. I know we've got people listening to this podcast in over 100 countries around the world. So for you, maybe the pandemic is more or less of an issue. Maybe the US elections are more or less of an issue. But think about, is there a level of stress there? Is that filling your bucket even more? Then, as if that wasn't enough, we now add on to the fact that we're going into the holiday season. So many of us are busier during the holiday season, and that holiday season may have a lot of different components to it this year, right? Like, are you going to get together with family or not because of the pandemic? Are there going to be Christmas parties? Are there not going to be Christmas parties? Are you spending more time on Zoom and on electronics because it's the only way you can connect with people? All of these things continue to fill up your bucket, right? So next thing you know, something silly happens, like, maybe one of your kids is being a brat today and just happens to say something mean. And that's the thing that just sets you off, pushes you over the edge. And now you're in a meltdown and your pain levels start to skyrocket and you end up in a flare for a couple of days. And you think, this is silly. Like, my kid just said something mean to me. Why am I losing it like this? It's not because of that. It's because your bucket was full of other things already, and you didn't have the capacity to deal with it, right? Now, I believe that all of these things are affecting all of us in a much greater way than we are giving credit for. I believe that even if your life is going well right now, even if your family is just the same as it was before the pandemic shut things down. Nobody in your family has lost jobs. Income is great. You're able to get food easily. All of that. There's still a background stressor just in the world, right? Like, we don't know how long is this going to be going on. We don't know how long are we going to have to be careful and avoid being in large groups of people. How long are we going to be watching the death toll rise, right? There is this background stress there. So please don't underestimate that. I've talked about it a couple times on the podcast here, and mostly because of the election here in the US. As I record this, it is November 5th. We are still waiting for a final outcome on some areas of the election. And it's just, for some of my friends, for some of my clients, some of my coaches, it's used up all of their capacity. It's filled their bucket to the brim. And when there's so many things that you can't do anything about using up your capacity, you have to be extra careful about doing the things that you can do something about. So things like I said before, getting good sleep, eating good food, practicing good self-care, managing your thoughts and how you think about things, managing your, being careful about not to overdo things, watching your step count, all of those kinds of things that you can control, because there's so much going on right now that you can't control. Another thing I wanted to bring up with today's episode that kind of puts some context into all of this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You may or may not be familiar with this. A guy named Maslow identified certain needs that every human being has. And the idea is that the lower level needs, you have to have those in order to be able to move up. It's almost like a ladder or a pathway where you've got that foundation at the bottom, and then you can move up to higher and higher things. And wherever you're at on that ladder, whatever thing that you're thinking about is I mean, it is what it is, right? It's not, there's nothing wrong with any of them. It's just a way of understanding why maybe some people are able to think about self-improvement and starting a nonprofit foundation or having a bigger house or whatever it might be, when somebody else might be just worried about food, shelter, clothing, things like that. And that's this hierarchy of needs. Now, at the very base level, by the way, I will have a graphic of this on today's show notes page. So if you'd like to visually see what I'm talking about, just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/49 and you'll be able to see this graphic. You can also just Google Maslow or Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you'll see a bunch of different pictures for this. So at the very base level is our physiological needs, things like food, water, shelter, clothing, getting enough sleep. For those of us with fibromyalgia, I believe that also includes things like having your pain at a reasonable level, having a reasonable amount of energy, right? Just those basic physiological needs. Once those are taken care of, then we can start to move up the ladder to safety and security. Those are things like employment, right? Having a job, having family and social stability, feeling safe in your own home, feeling safe in your body, safe in your mind, as one of my friends says, safe in your body, safe in your home, safe in your own mind, and just feeling safe and secure. That's that stability. You can see where that is less important if you're having trouble even just getting enough food to eat, right? And how that being able to hold down a job for those of us with fibromyalgia, it's a lot harder to do something like that if your pain levels aren't managed, right? So we keep moving up the ladder. After safety and security, above that, we've got love and belonging. So that's things like family, friendship, intimacy, sense of connection, being with people who just get you. We often get that with maybe support groups or working with a coach who understands you, right? That love and belonging. I understand you. I love you. I care about you. Above that, we've got self-esteem, things like confidence, respect of others, achievements. With fibromyalgia, I think this level is where we become confident in our ability to manage our own fibromyalgia. That's where we have that confidence that comes from, I know how to get back to my baseline normal, no matter what I go out and do. So there's a confidence to go out and try new things, to maybe do more things, to make commitments, to, maybe get together with friends or whatever it is, because you have predictable pain levels, energy levels, and you know how to get back to your baseline normal if something were to push you over, right? Above that self-esteem level is the self-actualization. This is where we get into acceptance of our life, our condition, our illness. This is where we get into creativity, into what is our purpose in life, what is our potential, focusing on becoming the best version of ourselves that we can be, giving back to the world, being a contributor to society, right? Now, the reason I bring this up is because maybe a year and a half ago, there were probably a lot of you that were up at the very top that were working on self-actualization. And you were working on things like becoming the best you that you could be. Maybe you were taking classes, or you were reading self-help books, or, whatever it might have been. Then the pandemic hit. And so many of us got dropped down on that ladder, right? All of a sudden, for many of us, now we are actually not feeling safe, not feeling secure. So we went from the highest level down to almost the very bottom. And for some people, they actually did end up at the very bottom, right? There were a lot of people, still are a lot of people, who have lost jobs, who now are worried about how they're going to buy food. They are worried about paying their rent, right? So we've gone from the top of the pyramid all the way to the very bottom. And that is it's a different space to live in, right? You can just think about that. How if you no longer feel safe and secure, for some people here in the US, the election is actually making them not feel safe and secure. So think about, just be aware that if you're having difficulty continuing with your self-improvement work or continuing with your creativity or struggling with your why am I here, contributing to society, those higher level things, realize that could very well be because you just now slipped 1, 2, 3 rungs down the ladder to being worried about your own safety and security. Or maybe 2 rungs down the ladder with love and belonging, and not because you're missing that connection with community because you're stuck at home. So like I said, I wanted to bring this up to just kind of put a context on things for people and to maybe help you understand why things might be a little bit more difficult right now. And like I said, there's a lot we can't change, but there is a lot that we can change. And one of the big things that we can change, one of the big pieces that I would love to encourage you with and coach you on today is being gentle with yourself. Just understanding that you have a diminished capacity. Your bucket is already more full than it normally is. You have less room for dealing with things. So if that means you have to say no more often so that you can say yes to the things that you really want, that is absolutely okay. In fact, I would want you to go back and listen. I'm looking up the episode number. I want you to go back and listen to episode 12, Say No So You Can Say Yes. Right now, it's even more important for us to be able to really choose where we're spending our energy, both our emotional energy, our physical energy, our mental energy, because we have a smaller bucket. We have a smaller capacity. So we need to say no more so that we can say yes to the things that we really want. We also need to be super gentle with ourselves because the reality is you cannot do everything, especially right now. And it's totally okay if you make a decision that feels right in your heart that might be not make any business sense or not make financial sense or may not make sense in a normal situation. We are not in a normal situation right now, folks. And we just really, we've got to listen to our intuition. We've got to listen to our heart, our mind, our gut, and pray, meditate, all of those things. Tap into our higher knowledge of what we need and ask that question. What do I need right now? And not just ask the question, but listen to the answer, right? If you ask that question, what do I need right now? And the answer is something like, you need to work less. And you think, I can't do that. I've got all these things I need to do. And just dismiss it. That's not helpful, right? So really take that intuition and those answers to heart and think about, okay, how can I do this? And know that, yes, this is just for a season. We don't know how long that season is, so we've got to also start making some adjustments. If this continues to be the normal for another year, 2, 5, whatever, then we need to adjust our expectations, adjust our actions, adjust our capacity, adjust our thinking. It also could be over sooner, right? But we don't know. And we've got to live in this moment where we are right now with what we have right now. So I hope those two things help you. The idea of this bucket capacity that may already be mostly full because of what's happening in the world around you, and understanding why you have a diminished capacity. I would personally recommend trying to do less right now because of that. You already have a diminished capacity, so taking on more things right now may or may not be helpful. It's just something to think about. I would also highly recommend that you evaluate your support network. Because you have a diminished capacity, you need additional support. And that support could look like, Zoom dates with some friends. I've got a couple of friends that we have Zoom dates every now and then, have a little virtual happy hour, or just chat. You might phone dates with friends or family. You might start, here in the US, Thanksgiving's coming up in a couple of weeks. Maybe you need to think about, what does that look like this year? Maybe we have a family Zoom call. Maybe we, have a conference call on the phone, or maybe we get together, maybe we don't. If you're home by yourself and family's not coming over, do you still need to do all the things, right? Because again, you've got a diminished capacity right now. So this may not be the time to, cook the turkey and make all the fixings, right? And have all that extra stuff. Maybe you just make it low key right now. Things are not usual right now, so it's perfectly okay if we don't do things in the usual way. There's another podcast episode I want to mention to you, since we are moving into the holiday season, and that's episode 22. That's our holiday survival guide. So give you some ideas. Of course, this was recorded, episode 22 was recorded last year before the pandemic. So there will be things that I talk about in there that may not be applicable now, but the overall concepts of choosing what you want to participate in, and sometimes even choosing that as a family, what is important to the family. There may be things that you think you need to do because this has always been what we do and this is the tradition, but that actually aren't really important to anybody. And until you have that conversation, you don't know. So I recommend checking out episode 22 for that holiday survival guide. And as always, if you want to explore what having a coach support you, what that might look like, how that might help you, we would love to have that conversation with you. If you go to today's podcast show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/49, we'll have a link where you can actually set up a consultation with me or one of my coaches, and we can talk about what that would look like for you to have additional support, and what it might look like to reduce some of those things in your bucket, right? If we can help lower your pain levels or increase your energy, then that takes some things out of your bucket and gives you more capacity to deal with things right now. This just popped into my head, but one of the things that I often talk with people about is, when is it the right time to work with a coach? I have people at two extremes. On one end, I'll have people say, oh, but I'm doing so well, I don't really need the help. And then on the other end of the extreme, I have people saying, oh, but I'm so sick, I can't really use the help. So on one end, people are thinking I'm not sick enough to need a coach. And on the other end, people are thinking I'm too sick to need a coach. And the reality is that we can help in all of those circumstances. A coach is there to support you. And we are there to help you. Some of that self-actualization may be at the top of that pyramid, but it might also be the very bottom level of the pyramid, where we're helping you figure out how to manage your pain levels and your energy levels and just those basic physiological needs. So anywhere on that spectrum there, a coach is there to help you where you are with what you are dealing with. So again, just go to today's show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/49, and you'll be able to schedule that consultation. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. I know this is a little bit shorter episode, but I just wanted to give you guys these two frameworks to think about as you're dealing with everything that's happening in the world right now. Like I said, please reach out if there's anything that we can do to help you, and we will see you back here for our next episode, which will be episode 50 on our very next Ask the Coach. So I'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Bye. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. If you're ready to see if working with a fibromyalgia coach can help you feel better faster, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com, where you can schedule a complimentary consultation to explore your options. During this call, we'll discuss your fibromyalgia journey, what your needs and challenges are, and give you recommendations on how to reach your goals the quickest way possible. Thank you for tuning in today, and join us next time as we explore more ways to help you take back control of your life and health. My music and sound editing were done by Daniel Munkus at Subtle Soup Records. Podcast management and creative copy by Sonia Louise of Performance Podcasting.